Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us. My name is Matt Zaccaro, and I'm President and CEO of HAI, and I'm glad to see you are interested in what I think is probably one of the most important topics that this industry is going to have to deal with moving forward. We have a great panel for you. The subject, as advertised, is the business case for UAS operations that, in essence, would supplement your helicopter operations, of course. The thing that I think is most important here is that we have gone past the point with UAS where it's a question of, are they coming and what are they going to do? They're here, and we already know what the opportunities are, and hopefully we're going to try to impart some of that information to you this morning. So what I'd like to do is just kick it off with a general overview of kind of how we see, at least HAI kind of sees the situation, and then we'll move into a much deeper level of information by some very, very high-level people with expertise in this area, far better than mine, and I'm looking forward for that exchange. And the way we'll do this is we'll give the presentations, and then we'll spend as much time as we need to. We have plenty of time scheduled for whatever questions and comments you might have. So with that, we'll move to the next slide. What is UAS? As long as I've been involved with it, I've heard everything under the sun as to unmanned aerial systems, unmanned aviation vehicles, aircraft systems, drones, predators, radio-controlled aircraft. And the other thing I like to remind people, they're also full production helicopters. When we say the word drone, unmanned vehicle, whatever your flavor of name is, you're thinking of something that probably fits on a tabletop that we all see on TV. I think we've overlooked the issue that there are full production helicopters right now that are flying without pilots, and they're doing it quite successfully. So that's another topic we want to, really think. And there are some people who would have you classify them as toys. We prefer to go with the FAA's definition. They have, in fact, identified unmanned vehicles as aircraft. They're a class and category of aircraft, and they're going to be in the airspace with us. Next slide. UAS are here and growing. Who better to operate the UAS than the helicopter operators? If you think about where the UAS vehicles are going to operate, it's going to be at the low altitudes, 500 feet and below. They're going to take advantage of one of our largest advantages with the helicopter is vertical reference flight and the ability to hover. They're going to do the same thing. The vertical lift operations are also going to be the missions that we perform currently in the utility fields with helicopters. And if the helicopters don't embrace the UAS operations and provide the capability to your customer base, someone else will do it. And why not us? We know all the parameters that are involved in the operation at that low altitude. The UAS market, FAA U.S. registry started in December of last year. I happen to be fortunate enough to be on the working group that developed the recommendation for the registry for the FAA. And that started out in December, so here we sit in March. And today, they're approaching 700,000 registered UAS vehicles. It surpassed the manned aircraft registration. Both helicopter and airplane only is roughly 380,000 aircraft. So they have eclipsed us by 2 times already. Now, the other thing you have to add in there is, obviously, not all the UAS are registered, to say the least. And estimates that I've seen say there are at least 1.5 million UAS in the U.S. currently. UAS future market is forecasted to be $22 billion business internationally in the next decade plus. So I think you get the scope of that this is absolutely the fastest growing segment of aviation that we've ever seen. UAS initiatives from HAI as to how we're reacting to it. We have formed a new UAS committee, and that's going quite well. It's a very eclectic group. It has helicopter operators, UAS operators, manufacturers. We have FAA. We have people from academia. and they're a very good group working very hard, and they're actually having one of their meetings here at HELI-EXPO. We also developed and established a new HAI membership category for UAS operators, and we're starting to get those joining HAI. The FAA DOT UAS registry working group, as I mentioned, I was on it. The FAA DOT UAS microlight working group, Chris Martino, our Vice President of Operations, was on that. And the newly established Drone Advisory Committee, which is the committee that's providing input to the FAA DOT, I was lucky enough to be selected to be on that committee as well. The new FAR Part 107, the FAA has issued that. It's out there. It covers commercial operations for UAS. Right now, I want to say recreational private users of UAS are not really under any regulatory oversight, and they have no requirements in terms of training or certification. We would like to see that changed as this industry grows, obviously, and that's one of the priorities that we are looking for. Our UAS desires, we hope that, and we're pretty confident it is the safety first priority. I think anything that we do integrating UAS into the National Airspace System has got to have as its top priority UAS. The good news with that is that the commercial operators and the ones that you've heard about and read about, the Amazon, Google, the major manufacturers such as DJI and other people, they have that same orientation. They're focused on safety first, and they want, you know, a structured environment for the UAS to enter the airspace, and I'm very glad to have that working relationship that we're all aiming at the same target. The only concern I have is that if you're in the commercial environment or if one of those companies is operating the UAS or involved with it, we have a comfort level. What we don't have a comfort level with is the recreational private user is just, I mean, it's your average person that buys the vehicle online or goes into a hobby shop and buys it, charges the battery, and away they go. And we would like that same culture of safety, training, certification to be placed over that segment of the industry so that we're all reading off the same sheet of music. We'd like the aircraft is going to be registered. That's one of the requirements. We would like operator training, pilot training, if you will. FAA regulations, they exist for the commercial, and that's going to develop Part 107. We'd like that increased over to the recreational. Now, keep in mind, we're not talking about the same regulatory oversight for a recreational private user, but that is already built into the system. We have multiple levels of certification and requirements for different levels of operation. I mean, we have recreational pilots, we have sport pilots, we have private pilots, commercial pilots, airline transport pilots. Every one of them has a different regulation requirement and training and certification requirement. And obviously, if you're out flying for fun and it's recreation and personal use, you shouldn't have the same requirement as the commercial operators, but there should be something, a base requirement for training and other things. And an enforcement capability. You know, this is an industry that is no different than ours. If you're flying an aircraft in the airspace, there needs to be a mechanism to hold those accountable who are non-compliant and operate in an unsafe manner. And every segment of aviation has that. This is not anything new. So this is a new category coming in. Those people who don't want to be compliant or safe, they should be held to, you know, to task. Avoidance of advisory for heliports. We want to make sure in the collateral material that goes out, they're advising, you know, so many miles within an airport. We also want to protect active heliports. It's the same environment, same potential for problems. The UAS potential, if you really just kind of take a cold, hard, real look and be unbiased and say, what is the potential for the helicopter industry and their customers for this vehicle? I think it's, and this is just a quick bullet list. There's many more items that you can say are it's beneficial to operate a UAS. Certainly the big one is a significant reduction in operating cost. It's a mere fraction of what it takes to operate a helicopter per hour to operate a UAS. A significant reduction in the noise impact. Right now, one of the major issues that is cutting back our business, restricting us from airspace, and causing us not to be able to get new heliports or hold on to the ones we have is noise. And I don't think anybody can deny the unbelievable noise impact reduction using a UAS. It's the elimination of a potential loss of crew and passengers. There aren't any. It's just the vehicle. A significant reduction of potential injury to persons on the ground if we unfortunately have an accident or incident. The ability to perform missions that helicopters can't do. There are certain missions that we have limits to what we can do with the helicopter, and the UAS in certain circumstances can go beyond those limits and complete that. The elimination of most ferry flights to the job site. This is a transport of the vehicle to the job site with you physically, rather than have to fly the helicopter to the job site. So those are some of the things you really have to take a look at, you know, in the hard cold of day, and say, okay, this is offering me different opportunities, and the same, it's going to offer my customer different things. The potential UAS missions, again, you know, I could fill up 4 slides with the missions that UAS can do, and I just kind of put some of the high point ones that we do currently. Package delivery, obviously, the Amazon proposal, everybody knows that. That is now extended out to other carriers and freight delivers, package companies. Disaster relief, first responders. One thing I saw, somebody sent me an article where we used to do beach patrol with helicopters, and they were looking for shark activity and also swimmers in distress. And now they use UAS. They send the UAS out, the lifeguards control the vehicle, they have live video coming back. If they see either the sharks or the swimmer in distress, it's an immediate notification. And the vehicle itself actually has a life preserver, personal flotation device on it, and it can hover right over the swimmer and drop it until the lifeguards can get out to the person. And that's a logical, efficient use of the vehicle. Military is using them. I don't think that's any secret. We all know that. Powerline, pipeline patrol and inspection. There's tests going on with that right now. Electronic news gathering. A lot of the news gathering stations have already gotten permits to operate, and a number of them have UAS up in the air for that. Aerial filmmaking, a number of production companies in Hollywood already use UAS. Law enforcement, we'll hear from one of our speakers more about that. Aerial applications, aerial firefighting. Now, aerial firefighting, they've used the UAS to do surveillance and command and control over the fire to monitor all the aircraft, but then they also had a full production helicopter fighting wildfires on a test program, and that was successful. Wildlife surveillance control, real estate has just been booming with the use of UAS. They use UAS now as a common tool to get aerial photography of the property, the surrounding neighborhood, and one of the most recent ones I saw was really kind of neat. After they finished filming the outside of the house, the property in the neighborhood, the UAS came around to the front of the house and the door opens and he goes inside the house with the UAS and actually gives a virtual tour of the UAS with a video through every room. That was pretty fancy. On geodetic survey, so. And that's just my contact information if you need to get a hold of me. Email is pretty simple, tailrotor@AOL. All righty, well, thank you, and I'll get the next speaker up here for you. And our next speaker is Alan Frazier, and Alan is an associate professor within the University of North Dakota at the School of Aerospace Science, and he's taught public safety aviation, helicopter aerodynamics, general aviation management, and instrument regulations and procedures. He serves as a flight instructor and stage check pilot, providing instruction in airplanes, land and sea, and helicopters. Has approximately 7,900 flight hours, and the pilot and command times 4,400 hours. as a flight instructor and holds FAA airline transport pilot, rated to fly airplanes, single-engine, helicopters, gliders, and small unmanned vehicles. He has served as a law enforcement officer for over 35 years, and his police assignments have been patrol enforcement, SWAT negotiations, internal affairs, air support. As the former officer with the Glendale, California Police Air Support Unit, where he flew missions supporting police operations. He also was selected as 2016 recipient of the Airborne Law Enforcement UAS Award. And right now he possesses a BS degree from Middle Tennessee State University Administration and an MPA degree, University of Southern California Public Administration. And he's currently on an assignment as a fellow with the Airborne Law Enforcement Association. So I welcome you, Alan, and anxious to hear.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to speak. So a couple of disclaimers. The first one is I don't have an entrepreneurial bone in my body. I don't own businesses. I've never been involved in a business, so I can't speak to the challenges that you have as entrepreneurs in establishing and growing your businesses. So I really come standing before you rather humbly as a practitioner, as someone who's flown aircraft for police departments. And my current assignment with the Grand Forks Sheriff's Office as a deputy pilot is to coordinate a regional unmanned aircraft systems unit. So we have 5 agencies operating 6 different systems, from the high price range, a AeroVironment RQ-11 Raven, which is well over $100,000 for the system, down to our least expensive system, just under $1,000, a DJI Phantom 4, and systems in between as well at all kinds of different levels of capability, as well as different price points. We've been doing that now for a little over 4 years and completed about 1,700 flights, but 160 actual missions. And a mission could be multiple flights, or it could be a single flight. And we've done everything from working homicide scenes to searching for suspects and victims, doing post-disaster analysis. So we've garnered a decent amount of experience with it. So that's what I stand before you to talk about, is some of the things as a practitioner, what I think might be business opportunities for those of you in the audience that are entrepreneurs. So talk to us a little bit about why use unmanned aircraft from a public perspective. It seems like a daunting figure, but there's over 18,000 local law enforcement agencies, that state and local, in the nation. Less than 220 of them operate manned aircraft, and no secret why the other 17,680 don't, and it's cost primarily. I'm sure there are a few that would say, well, we just don't have an application for manned aircraft, but the vast majority of chiefs and sheriffs, if you ask them, would you like to have a manned aircraft? They'd say, absolutely, but I can never afford that in my wildest dreams. We look at fire departments, and if you were at the panel that I spoke on with Matt Zuccaro moderating on Monday, I threw out a figure of 50,000 fire departments. And right after that, a friend called me, a good friend who's a fireman and has a UAS program, and he goes, wow, Al, your number's really big there. And I said, no, it's not. I said, you know, it's 50,000. There's, those include local ambulance services and rescue squads. And he goes, no, stop right there. Those aren't fire departments. And you know, it was kind of a ha-ha moment for me. And I said, you know, you're absolutely correct. Those aren't fire departments. I'm going to correct that number. So the true number out there is 27,000 fire departments, and those would be volunteer fire departments and paid full-time fire departments. There are, though, in fact, a little over 25,000 rescue squads, volunteer ambulance services, and so forth that serves communities. So for the sake of my friend and for accuracy, I want you to make sure that you know there's 27,000 fire departments. Less than 50 of those utilize manned air support, and again, for the same reason in most cases, is that they just cannot afford manned air support. So now let's contrast it. You know, a light turbine helicopter on the low end of the range, about $1.8 million before you start putting specialized equipment aboard the aircraft, with operating costs of, again, on the low range of about $575 per hour and upwards from there. Now, no argument about it, an extremely useful tool, and UAS in most cases pale in comparison to what a manned aircraft can do. But now place yourself in the shoes of a fire chief or a police chief or a sheriff. Again, in his or her wildest dreams, they will never be able to afford a manned aircraft. You know, what could they do to try to fill that void? And the answer is they could operate small unmanned aircraft for an average purchase cost of less than $30,000, and you already heard the range from less than $1,000 to over $100,000. And in most cases, for less than $20 per hour operating costs. And it's been our experience, the lion's share of that operating cost is actually prorating out the insurance cost for the hull damage and the liability insurance that we choose to carry. Now, our particular program in North Dakota, the Regional Air Support Program, actually began as a research project collaborating with the University of North Dakota. And what we found when we tabulated all of our data is that we could do about 1/3 of the missions of a manned helicopter for about 2% of the purchase costs and about 4% of the operating costs. So no matter how you do the cost-benefit analysis, that comes up favorable for the use of small unmanned aircraft systems. So some business opportunities. Obviously sales of UAS to public safety agencies. You've seen the numbers up there of the potential clients, and many of those agencies are very large agencies with multiple stations. And you know, I could see at some time in the future that this will be used somewhat the way we do canines now, is that we'll have officers who are cross-trained to use small unmanned aircraft, and they will have those aircraft in their vehicles. Most of the time they won't need them, 90, 95, maybe even a higher percentage of the time. They'll never need that unmanned aircraft. But on those few calls where that aerial situational awareness would help resolve the call more safely and more efficiently, they will switch hats and they'll become a small unmanned aircraft system operator. All right, turnkey UAS operations. This has been done on a limited basis already, but the potential of an entrepreneur putting together a group of pilots and contracting with law enforcement and fire agencies to provide UAS services for them. Obviously, in order to make a decent business model out of this, it's going to have to be done on a regional basis in a fairly densely populated area with a multi-jurisdiction. So what I would envision is that contractor would respond from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, helping out, giving an aerial perspective on fire and police calls. Consulting to fire and police departments. I mean, that's one of the things that we do at the Airborne Law Enforcement Association, is try to spread pollen about the use of UAS as well as, of course, manned helicopters. We've incorporated 2 UAS courses into our annual conference. One is a Part 107 remote pilot preparation course, and the other is a UAS operations course. But there is plenty of business opportunity out there for entrepreneurs to do similar things, whether it be the creation of a remote pilot preparation course or simply consulting to fire and police departments, because so many agencies out there contact us, and you know, there's a pretty steep learning curve on this. They don't understand what a certificate of authorization is, or that Part 107 exists, or what type of aircraft should they purchase. So a lot of times you just have to mirror that back to them and say, okay, well, let's go back to the beginning. What types of missions do you envision accomplishing? And let's work forward from that. Additionally, looking at payloads, you know, trying to help departments out in determining what type of payload they would need. Can they get by with just an electro-optical camera, or do they need more advanced technology, infrared, or hyperspectral, multispectral cameras? Maybe some specialized sensor aboard there to do hazmat sniffing or radiological monitoring. UAS training, going out and, as we said, actually doing a Part 107 exam prep course, basic UAS flight training. There are not that many folks that are in this business now, but there are agencies crying out for consultants that can come in and provide them with some in-house training on how to actually fly the aircraft. And even above and beyond that, scenario-based training. So it's one thing to know how to fly the aircraft, it's another to know how to safely and effectively utilize it on a wide spectrum of calls. Search patterns, searching for victims, searching for suspects, that type of thing. Maintenance technician training. Again, a couple of innovative community colleges have now created UAS maintenance technician training programs. But there, again, is a lot of opportunity nationwide to expand traditional airframe and power plant programs with a UAS specialization. Creation or adaptation of software. I met with one of the vendors yesterday to talk with them and give them some ideas about, again, as a practitioner and user, what would we like to see in some software applications that would help us in situational awareness, airspace awareness, that type of thing. Things as simple as pilot and maintenance tracking. If we're going to make this a robust industry, I think that we have to parallel many of the things that we've done with manned aircraft. And that includes accurate pilot time tracking and accurate maintenance time tracking. There's a lot of questions out there about how long will a component last? We have the answer to that with most manned helicopter components. We don't have the answer to that to most UAS components. So how long can I expect a brushless electric motor to last? How long will a speed controller last? Should I periodically, on a time basis, switch out the rotor blades on my UAS? The only way we're going to know the answer to those questions is accurate maintenance tracking, so that we can come up with some educated guesses about failure rates on those components. Airframe and payload development. UAS underwriting and sales. So Matt alluded to this on Monday, is that the insurance industry is awakening to the fact that there's a lot of business potential out there. So there's not a lot of information, though, about accident rates and so forth. So it's almost right now throwing a dart at a board. What should a premium be for liability? Okay? It's a little easier to quantify hull damage because we have a basis on that of what the risk might be. But when it comes to overall liability of the aircraft, being able to make some determination on that. Errors in emissions coverage, especially for law enforcement agencies that may be using this in an enforcement capacity. I don't know how that came up there twice, but my apologies. All right, future opportunities, and these are really dependent upon the establishment of a way to safely conduct beyond visual line of sight operations. And of course, FAA approval of those risk mitigation factors. But power line and pipeline inspections from a regulator standpoint as well as from a company standpoint. You own the power lines, you own the pipeline, and you want to inspect those as we do traditionally today with manned aircraft. But also from a regulator standpoint, does it make sense to conduct periodic inspections of these type of infrastructure to determine that the companies that have laid that infrastructure are complying with appropriate policies, procedures, laws, and regulations. Fire watch patrols. In areas that logging is very popular. Being able to go out, we've come a long way from fire towers on ridges to aerial manned aircraft fire patrols to spot fires. Is that something that we could now delegate over to unmanned aircraft? And I believe so. And I think that a pretty robust case can be made to the FAA. Many of those areas are sparsely, if unpopulated areas with very little air traffic. These could be done from relatively low altitude, so it might be one of the first places that we can cut our teeth on getting our foot in the door with beyond visual line of sight operations. Matt's alluded to fire attack, which I think is just an outstanding application of unmanned aircraft. Started to say small, but can't do too much with a small unmanned aircraft on fire attack. But medium to larger airframes that are able to carry a decent amount of water retardant to be able to attack wildfires. Aerial application, although outside the realm of public safety in most cases, again, a great application can be done at a very low altitude that in most cases would not interfere with manned aircraft, even helicopters. And again, kind of one of those dirty, boring jobs that may very well be a great place for UAS to make inroads. So, again, Matt, thank you for having me, and I'll turn it over to our next speaker, sir.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Terry Fogarty, and Terry is the Director of Business Development for K-MAX helicopter programs. He is a Navy veteran and has over 40 years of military and commercial helicopter experience, both domestic and international. He was the general manager of the Command UAS group that oversaw the development and testing and successful deployment of an unmanned KMAX to Afghanistan. In his present capacity, he's responsible for the marketing and business development for both the manned KMAX helicopter and the unmanned aircraft system program within command. In 1992, he was selected to develop and lead the customer service operation for a new helicopter, the K-1200 KMAX. In addition to his KMAX responsibilities, he led the integrated logistics support activities for the New Zealand, Australia, and Egypt helicopter programs. He holds an FAA airplane and power plant license, a Bachelor of Science degree from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and a Master's in Business Administration from Rensselaer Polytech Institute. And welcome, Terry.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everyone. Command here at HAI is mostly focused about the KMAX helicopter, a helicopter that we FAA certified back in 1994. But for the purpose of this panel, I'm going to concentrate on the unmanned KMAX. Many people don't know, but Command flew the first unmanned helicopter back in 1957, and it was for the same reasons that we developed the unmanned KMAX, for the dull missions, the dirty missions, and the dangerous missions. Over in Afghanistan, starting in 2011, we were contractually required to do a 6-month program and be able to fly 30,000 pounds a week. The program lasted 33 months, and the only reason we came back is because the Marines came back. We were flying 30,000 pounds a night, and we weren't flying anything very sexy. We were flying water, we were flying food, we were flying the things that the troops needed at the forward operating bases, the combat outposts, or just dropping supplies at a GPS waypoint in the middle of the desert for someone else to pick up. This Afghanistan experience was a result of a competition that we won back in 2011. And all we wanted to do was get trucks off the road. A very basic mission. The military was looking for a new tool. And all we're talking about with UAS is a different way of doing things. And that tool resulted in a lot of success. We were able to move 4.5 million pounds of stuff. Again, it wasn't sexy stuff. Over 1,900 sorties. We had a mission availability rate of over 94%. About 1.1, 1.4 maintenance man-hours per flight hour. But the most important thing is we took those threats away from the truck drivers. Instead of putting those trucks on what they call a road in Afghanistan, and essentially they were paths that we would send our trucks over. They weren't nice asphalt roads. They weren't even gravel roads. They were paths carved out of the hills by animals. And our trucks were going on there. And to go 10 miles, it might take them 8 hours. Obviously, flying in the air with a KMAX, that same load made that 10 miles in minutes and took all of the exposure hours away. That was the critical thing. We took 900 vehicles off the road. When you look at a single cargo vehicle and all of the defense people that went with it, sometimes those defense people were on the ground, sometimes they were airborne, we eliminated the threat. During that same time frame, the Army gave us contracts to add capability to the unmanned KMAX. The operations in Afghanistan used beyond line of sight and line of sight navigation. Back home with the Army, we're doing high bandwidth beyond line of sight video. It was an amazing picture, shooting the signal up through the rotors, up off a satellite, back down to the ground station. And some of those pictures were like you were watching the TV in your living room. We did some EOIR, we did some beacon delivery. Beacon delivery was about a mounted person throwing a sensor out of his truck, and then the helicopter would find that sensor and deliver the supplies there. We also did some experimentation with autonomous pickup to where you didn't have to have a person there to hook up the load. All of the loads in Afghanistan were flown with a long line. The aircraft didn't have to land. It went to a GPS waypoint and landed the load where they wanted it. At the same time, we were doing some work for the Navy where we added onboard decision-making under the HELI-EXPO program so that the aircraft would determine where it wanted to land within some very general parameters. All of that success on the military side brought some of the commercial interest. Some of the people that are very interested in unmanned KMAX and unmanned helicopters the size of KMAX are the oil and gas people. They operate in some very austere environments where they have to build a road, where they have to maintain a search and rescue capability, whether they have fatigue for their people. They have a very harsh operating environment. They're looking at UAS for a number of reasons, but the number one, as we've been talking about, is safety, and it's for the safety of the people on the ground. They're also looking to increase their operations. They're trying to reduce their infrastructure. All of these things are about a business trying to get better, more efficient. Another area was unmanned firefighting. We've done demonstrations with a Bambi bucket with the unmanned KMAX in Griffith, New York, and also out in Boise, Idaho. And all we did was prove the concept that you could use an unmanned aircraft to fight fires. The purpose of the unmanned firefighting is not to do it during the day, because we're not nearly as efficient as a human, and won't be for many, many iterations. But it would allow the Forest Service, the Department of the Interior, to fight the fires at night and to keep them from reinvigorating over the night when helicopters were not flying. We see that as a long-term opportunity for an operator to contract with the Department of Interior. I'll tell you that any KMAX helicopter out in the field, and I am suggesting that just about any other manufacturer, could put in an unmanned kit into any existing helicopter to help do those nighttime operations. The other thing that's really coming out with the unmanned helicopter also is the humanitarian operations. There are many, many places in this world where there isn't any infrastructure, there isn't enough food, there isn't enough water, and the NGOs, the non-government organizations, the UN, World Food Programs, and others are looking for unmanned capabilities, because they're going to take food, and they're going to take water, they're going to take medical supplies into some places you really don't want to travel to. And to be able to do it with an unmanned allows you to do a complete mission without putting anybody in harm's way. You put the aircraft in harm's way, you put the supplies in harm's way. But the key is you don't put any people in harm's way. And that's really the key to the unmanned. Remember, we want to do unmanned stuff for the dull, the dirty, the dangerous. We're not here to do the normal things. I think people of my generation, I won't be flying in a pilotless helicopter or a pilotless commercial aircraft. I want to have a pilot up there that has the same stake in the game as I do. But I think a generation from now, we're going to be moving people without pilots up front. We're going to be moving cargo with FedEx and DHL without pilots up front. That's the way this is going, and as Matt alluded to, it's now. What we have to figure out as a helicopter industry is how do we make this unmanned aircraft a tool fit into your toolkits. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Our next speaker is Brendan Shulman, and Brendan is Vice President of Policy and Legal Affairs at DJI, the world's leading civilian drone company. Brendan is responsible for setting and representing DJI's global public policies relating to regulatory and legal issues and advocacy for reasonable and balanced policies, outcomes for drone operations at the federal, state level, and internationally. Brendan manages DJI's public policy professionals in Europe, Asia, and North America. Previously, he was the head of the unmanned aircraft systems practice at the law firm of Kramer 11 in New York City, where he handled some of the landmark cases and regulatory proposals. Brendan served on the FAA's UAS registration task force and is a member of the FAA Drone Advisory Committee. He has been building and flying his own civilian drones for over 20 years. Welcome, Brendan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Actually, I really appreciate what HEI is doing in the unmanned space. The creation of the UAS membership category and the outreach, I think, is terrific. I'm very pleased to be on the Drone Advisory Committee, the DAC, with Matt, and working together to help solve the challenges and problems that we will have in the industry in the future. We are, if we could put the slides up, just to kind of introduce those of you who don't know DJI, we are the leading UAS manufacturer with what some people estimate is about a 70% market share for small unmanned aircraft. Really the tools, not the toys at the bottom of Matt's slide, but the tools that people are using both recreationally and personally to create art and memories with their friends and family and on vacation, but also the tools that people are using in countless business applications. And you're really hearing from the other great panelists on what some of those applications are. Just some people are kind of, vis-a-vis the floor, what is the development cycle for some of these products? We're putting out a new drone about every 2 to 3 months. Actually, this slide is already out of date. I don't have our new Matrice M200 on there, but basically everything is under 55 pounds. On the bottom left, the M600 is a heavy lift, sort of Hollywood camera platform used in Hollywood for movie making, all the way down to the Mavic Pro on the bottom right, which weighs about 1.75 pounds and is our very popular new one. The Matrice M200, which just came out, is really for the industrial enterprise customers, oil, gas, energy, infrastructure inspection, agriculture, sort of the industrial side of the UAS ecosystem. I wanted to highlight, though, some of the things that you're hearing about today are great applications, certainly money-making. The business case is there for them. What excites me about the technology is what people are doing that you wouldn't expect, the applications that are actually surprising. And I wanted to just highlight one of them for you, if I could. Oh, there we go. So this is a drone, one of our drones, collecting whale snot, right? Literally flying behind the whale, which you see in the top right, and on a Petri dish that was just Velcroed onto the top of our Inspire 1 drone is being used to catch the spray from the whale. That allows the researchers who are doing this to figure out the gender of the whale, its health, whether it's pregnant, migratory patterns, basically saving the whales using small UAS. And this is an application I don't think you could do any other way. I don't think you could bring a boat close enough to the whale to collect that. I don't think a manned helicopter would be a good idea. I think you'd certainly stress the animal if you had a manned helicopter that close to the whale. So these are the kinds of applications, if you'd asked me a year ago, what can you do with a drone? I never would have said collect whale snot. Now it's my favorite thing to talk about. And I think that's where we see the openness of the technology, the affordable price point, the relatively reasonable barrier to entry under Part 107 so that people can go out there and buy a system, learn how to use it, and then go out and do great things with it that I couldn't even predict a short time ago. Very important to us, though, as we're pushing the boundaries of what the technology can do in terms of the camera, the features, the functionality, some of the automated flight controls, is also to make sure things are safe. And so we have, over the years, we've actually been around 10 years. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary this past year. We've implemented a variety of safety features in the drones. I'm just going to show you, I don't know if you guys notice the rotorcraft on stage here. Probably not. I actually brought, this is our Mavic Pro. It's actually in a, this is not our case. This is a water bottle case I got from Amazon for $12. So this is the Mavic Pro. Came out about 6 months ago or so. Folds up. So about 1.75 pounds, and then to deploy it, you just pull out the legs, and now you've got your small UAS. There's a 4K camera, and this will fly for about 27 minutes. So the point I wanted to make about this is we've got all of those safety features that I had on that slide built into this. So there's a GPS receiver. The drone knows where it is at all times, and we can program into the drone what we call no-fly zone or geofencing technologies. We'll talk about that in a minute. But also there are 2 extra cameras at the front to create a computer vision model of the world, and that's used for obstacle avoidance. So if you were to fly the drone towards the wall or a tree or a person, it will actually stop itself and hover rather than colliding, even if you're commanding the UAS to move forward. We also have a height limitation, so a lot of people are concerned about altitude. There have been reports of high altitude UAS, whether those are accurate or not. There is a flight altitude restriction on this, and other features too. Automatic return to home. If the battery is running low, it doesn't just stop and fall. It comes back and lands itself at the takeoff point automatically. So we're pushing the boundaries on what we can do, not just in terms of supporting business applications, but also in terms of the safety of operations. Afterwards, you're welcome to come take a look at that. So let me talk a little bit about the geofencing. That's something that's of significant interest to various people in the aviation community. I've talked about it before. We actually have had this for 4 years, implemented in our Phantom 2 product in 2013. And the idea here is we know, and I think we all appreciate, that airports and other areas with aviation activity are sensitive and are generally not places where you'd expect to find a UAS flying, except with authorization. So as we created the original system, again, like your smartphone, the drone has a GPS receiver. It knows where in the world it is if it's outside, and we can pre-program it to say, oh, this is an airport, you shouldn't fly there. And so we kind of drew circles around the airports in accordance with the 2012 FAA reauthorization, Section 336, the 5-mile rule. We kind of use that as the basis for where the drones probably should either receive a warning or in some cases cannot take off or fly into. We've upgraded that system since this time to what we call the GEO System, and here's where we added a live component. So we now have the ability to push live geofencing updates to the drone. So in the case of Department of the Interior wildfires, FAA TFRs, when the president goes down to Florida, every so often, there's a big TFR that goes up, and our drones pick that up, and you cannot take off in the TFR when it's active if you've picked up that signal from us over the internet. We've also added prisons and nuclear power plants, other areas where there are concerns about UAS flying without authorization. Now there's a balancing act here, and this really does go to the business case topic of the panel. We have seen a tremendous number of companies with authorization doing beneficial things at airports, everything from runway inspection, aircraft inspection, wildlife mitigation, building facilities, helping with construction projects. I get an email almost every day, hey, I'm an airport manager or I'm a contractor at an airport, I can't take off with your drone at the airport even though I have permission and authorization and I have a contract and I need to start my work tomorrow. So there's a price for this technical safety feature, which is that we are interfering, though we don't want to, with authorized operations. So we have to think about how to use the technology solutions in a way that supports all these wonderful business applications. And so we do have, in some locations, a self-unlocking mechanism for geofencing if you have a verified account. And in places like Washington, D.C., where we don't allow self-unlocking, you can come to us, show your authorization, and we can unlock you with about a week's notice. So we definitely want to support those business applications where people have authorization, but we are trying to do our part to at least create an impediment to inadvertent operation. You know, when someone doesn't realize they're really close to the airport or they're in Washington and they never heard of the FRZ, well, you know, the drone's going to tell them that there's something they need to do, and in some cases stop them from doing it. We've also used this technology to help protect the Olympic Games. I didn't see any reports of drones coming out of that, thankfully. We worked with the government of Brazil to identify the venues and put up temporary geofencing around that. And as I mentioned, we worked with the DOI to get their wildfire information into our geofencing system. And so if every time there's a DOI, it's an internal system. It's not used for air support necessarily. It's actually just, there's a fire here, and there's a lot of them, that gets sent to our drone, and we have a zone that's set up. However, that zone is unlockable because we want the firefighters, I think we just heard there are tens of thousands of firefighters who could use, 27,000 fire departments who could use drones in fires. So again, we don't want to just turn off the drone. We have to have a balance and take into account not just the business applications, but the public safety applications. And this was not on my first slide. I have to update the first slide, but this is our new Matrice 200, the really industrial enterprise drone that we announced a couple weeks ago. You can put 2 cameras at once on it, including a thermal camera made in partnership with FLIR. You can put our Z30 zoom camera on it. Great functionality, and I'm pleased to say that we've incorporated ADS-B into this drone. So this is our first platform that has built-in ADS-B so that the drone operator can learn about the traffic that's out there. Of course, that requires the traffic to be sending out ADS-B out, and we certainly can have a discussion as to whether the helicopter community is more amenable to ADS-B out if in the future the UAS operators are more likely to have ADS-B in as part of all of these safety features and technologies. So again, as we develop the new features and capabilities of a system like the M200, we're also thinking about what we can do to enhance safety so that all these business applications can be conducted safely, your insurance premiums are reasonable, and all of that. I'm looking forward to our discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Todd Chase, UAS Program Manager for Oceaneering, GDS. Todd is an oil and gas industry expert on unmanned aerial systems, UAS, that has helped define industry best practices for the technology safety, efficiency, and regulatory compliance. He is responsible for developing and integrating UAS capabilities throughout Oceaneering's global network of asset inspection and data management services. Todd came to Oceaneering from BP Oil, where he served as aviation safety advisor. While there, he helped found one of the industry's UAS working groups and worked with other major oil and gas companies to evaluate, assess, and issue recommended UAS procedures. Prior to BP, Todd was a Coast Guard and Air Force pilot. Todd's final duty station was the 147 Reconnaissance Wing at Ellington Field, Joint Reserve Base, Houston, where he served as Flight Commander and Chief of Safety, as well as the organization's primary advisor on UAS safety. Todd holds a Bachelor of Science from the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. And welcome, Todd.
Great. Thank you, Matt. It's great being here. As Matt said, I'm coming in here from a oil and gas perspective. Obviously, this is an aviation crowd, so when we start talking some of these standards and expectations that we have within oil and gas, I'm sure many of you will be familiar with what these slides talk to. As Matt said, basically got started out in Coast Guard aviation and then did a tour with the Navy, T-34s, and then over to the Air Force there at Ellington Field, Air Guard unit, active duty, and we got bracked, went to Predators, and that's kind of how I ended up getting the UAV stink on me, and it just, like we see Jay Forte back there, what we found out in the, he's out at the wing with me, and he's still there, active duty, but anyways, once you kind of got this stink on you, it just seems it's such a rapidly growing field. It was, at BP, it was, I guess, good to have that kind of background going into a commercial setting where when BP did that first commercial overland UAS operation up there in the North Slope. So was able to help them out with that and develop some standards and guidelines for BP initially a few years ago. So just a real quick slide about Oceaneering. If you're not familiar, it's just offshore, a lot of most of our work is subsea and offshore, and in a lot of inspections. We do have a global survey company, and we do have a footprint similar to a major oil and gas company. So we look very similar as far as our profile and the locations we operate as most of the large oil and gas companies that we serve. So anyways, Oceaneering does own most of the work class large ROVs, and I'll get into this a little deeper, but we subcontract out our UAS operations where it's all about the data. It's all about the data we're gathering to meet our customer and client demands, and the UAS is just another platform like the ROV to get that data for us. Just real quick on our program in general, we subcontract out our UAS operations and provide a oversight and assurance compliance assurance to industry and client UAS requirements and standards from an aviation perspective. So when we go in and look at that, and one of the things that I think the strength of being a subcontractor, end user of these UAS operations and subcontracting these out is we're UAS agnostic. So we're not invested heavily in a certain type of platform or hardware to meet our client needs, and we have that flexibility to go out there and find the right platform with the right experienced operator to get the data that we need to support our clients' demands. So as we kind of get into this, one of the things I like to bring up is when I was at BP a couple years ago, the threshold of entry was so low. You see all these ma and pa, just people coming out of the woodwork with going out and buying a DJI and coming up to getting the right connections at BP and having the discussion what they need to do to get an oil and gas contract with the U.A.S. And I was home on vacation at my parents' house in Colorado, and the neighbor came over. He had just bought a DJI, and we're having this discussion as I'm kind of working through some of the expectations there at BP. And one of it was kind of interesting. We started talking about safety management systems and maintenance programs and operational procedures and training and currency and all that. And he kind of got bored with that discussion pretty quick. And he's like, "Well, you see that old RV out in front of the house?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Rob. What is it?" He said, "That's my other business venture." I'm like, "What's that?" He's like, "That's my cannabis." So Colorado just legalized the pot, and he was taking that cannabis and picking up people at the airport and doing their little marijuana tours there around Boulder and Denver, and I'm like, just thought, yeah, maybe we got to put the drug testing onto the standards. But so that was the kind of people that were approaching you, and really we're looking to see the serious operators that come at this from an aviation perspective, because a lot of these programs are vetted, not only by me for oceaneering, but the major oil and gas companies that have the aviation departments will look at these operations as they would look at a major helicopter operator. So it's not about the drones. It's not about the hardware, although that's important. We got a slide coming up to this, but Jay Forte with Sky Futures out there now, and Nick Rogers shared this slide with me, and I like it's a great slide. It just kind of breaks down all the different the verticals that we look at when we're looking at an operator, and what some of these more sophisticated UAS operators will go through when building their program. So, personally, we like to use these operators that have the commercial experience. Offshore, it's very difficult to get that experience, and they've been doing it up in the North Sea for quite a while. So Sky Futures was one of our first approved operators here for UAS operations. And this is another slide from them. I just wanted to point out there's actually, obviously, as you know, and with the slides we just saw, there's just tremendous levels of sophistication in these unmanned aircraft, and we look to ensure that the aircraft being used on our assets are basically have redundancies and the sophistication to support loss of to support positive control of that aircraft at all times. So redundant navigation systems, redundant motors that you could lose a motor, and that kind of capabilities, being able to operate in that harsh environment offshore. It's probably one of the more challenging environments where you'll see UAS being applied. So it's great. It helps. It supplements our inspections and keep. We're aiming to make the guys that are hanging on ropes, their exposure less. It supplements the data set that they're already they're out there getting, and obviously with some of the cost savings mentioned earlier compared to some of the traditional inspection methods that we use with the helicopters on a flare tip or the scaffolding set up on a stack, that kind of thing. So, anyways, this is another operator of ours out of the North Sea, based in Edinburgh. But they have a tremendous training program for their offshore crews, where they'll see these guys get nearly 500 flights sometimes. Sometimes they'll go a year and a half to 2 years before they're qualified solo offshore to fly these aircraft. So we really like to see that experience level before we're sending the guys offshore on our job, supporting our clients. So this kind of gets a bit drier, but basically we default to the HSAC, which is basically I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Helicopter Safety Advisory Council, and we meet in a smaller group. I'm the vice chair of the group with most of the major oil companies, and we've developed these guidelines, and we've fed them through to the IOGP. Their aviation subcommittee controls as most of you probably know, the basically aircraft management guidelines, which is the default standard for most of the oil and gas aviation requirements. And IOGP is releasing a document, S6, on UAS standards, which has been basically fed by the work that we've done in the HSAC group. So UK Oil and Gas has recently came out with some real good guidance, especially for the offshore inspection piece, and we're looking to incorporate some of those pieces into the next revision of the HSAC guidance. And then another piece that we're trying to maintain is we have a lot of momentum with the major oil and gas companies on high-level standards, and trying to keep that consistency between the organizations such as API, HSAC, IOGP, UK Oil and Gas. So trying to maintain that consistency within our guidelines, within the industry. Obviously, there's going to be different requirements between the BPs, the Shells, the Exxons, the Chevrons, but at a high level, at least trying to be on the same page and take these different the work being done in the different groups out there and incorporate those into our guidance as we move forward. So these get into just some of the requirements, some of the things, that, not necessarily requirements, but the guidance that we look for when we vet an operator. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with them, just similar things that we're looking at for doing a review of a major helicopter operator, just scale to reflect the size of the smaller UAS organization. But safety management systems ultimately is the litmus test for basically a good solid operator. That's you go in there and look at that they have all the pieces that maybe not, as you mentioned, not to the size of a PHI or whatever, but they do have a incident reporting system, that they do have leadership buy-in, that they do have a just culture, and that they have their maintenance programs, their operational manuals set, and the guidance with HSAC and IOGP, it's not meant to be an operations manual, so we're just looking at that sort of those different elements that you're all familiar with before we authorize that operator to work for us. And then these are some of the elements. Battery handling program, that's always a work in progress, and something that's very important, especially transporting these LiPo batteries offshore in a helicopter. So data security privacy, that's a big one. That's one thing. That's a lot of it's 90% of the battle. You got the safety management systems and all that in place, but what are they doing on the data side? And there's a lot of privacy concerns and the data management. These large oil companies, they'll have their IT departments. They have to go in and vet from an IT side their data security protocols, and Oceaneering's been doing that. So a lot of times we'll work with the operators just to hand over the raw data, or maybe they do the reports and then we store the data. But that's just something that we spend a lot of time and effort working on, making sure that piece is right. And obviously the maintenance programs, as we talked about earlier, we're not looking for these parts that will, or a program that just has the critical flight components fly to fail. We look for some sort of replacement protocols that have been set up, either recommended by the manufacturer. But again, along with the maintenance, the incident reporting, it's very critical to try to gather this information because it's such a relatively new thing offshore. Although they've been doing it in the North Sea for a few years, it's still, there's not a lot of data on the incidents and the these maintenance, these critical components. So we're trying to learn more about that as we move forward and keep our guidelines and expectations updated and current in such a rapidly moving industry is very challenging at times. But there's a lot of work being done across the segment, and just summarizing it, obviously it's a tool, it's a great tool, but there's a lot of procedures and expectations and programs behind it before you'd be qualified to operate in most oil and gas companies. So, thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Appreciate it. Our next speaker will be Ray Newcomb, the president of JBI Helicopter Services. Ray started his helicopter career in 1979 at the Hawthorne College in Antrim, New Hampshire. He graduated in 1983 with a Bachelor in Business Administration and an Associate in Science of Professional Aviation. He started college at the college with flight instructor, single engine land rating, and then started immediately working for the college in 1979. Then he transitioned to helicopters. In 1999, Ray purchased Joe Brigham helicopters. He grew the company to 6 Bell 206Bs, 1 OH-58, 1 Bell 407, and 1 managed Bell 429, and as well as a Bell customer service facility, and maintains 32 helicopters. In 2015, he was seriously looking into the UAS market to see if he could vertically tier the company and make it a one-stop shop for his customers. In 2016, he incorporated Granite State UAV and continues to grow the capabilities of the company. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, and if most of you are here as helicopter operators, probably looked at the UAV market as something that was going to be competition. I heard all that, listened to that for roughly about 5 or 6 years, and not really believing myself that they were going to put me out of business. Decided to look more and more into what the UAV market could do to help my business. And like I said, in 2013, started looking into UAVs and decided to get involved with it. Now, with that, takes a lot of time, investigating the market. We're a big utility operator. We have 9 different utilities that we do Powerline patrols for in the Northeast, so that was my target market to begin with. Trying to figure out what they wanted for deliverables from us. And as most of this stuff, what my experience has been is they really don't know. They've heard from all the industry experts, and they hear things that they want to get things from the cloud, they want pictures, they want videos, but they really don't know what they want in the very end. And I'll cite some examples as I go on. So when we started exploring into the UAV market, trying to figure out how to do it, we went about it, got our 333 exemption. A lot of the pilots that work for me are drone pilots also. And then we had a company that, we met a company through the New England Helicopter Pilots Association that was a company called Media Wing. And they had put a lot of money into the UAV market and hired a lot of people, and they found what they were coming up against was they didn't have procedures in place. They didn't have a safety management system. They didn't have pilots. They didn't know how to vet their pilots. They didn't know how to train their pilots, even though a lot of them were rated pilots. Didn't have safety management systems, had never heard of a risk analysis. They had the equipment, had spent a lot of money, but really didn't know how to integrate it. So what we decided to do was team up with them, and it's actually been a very good team. Getting together with the lawyers and getting all that part of it worked out is probably the toughest part as a helicopter operator and a whole separate company. We worked through all that, and then we spent basically 9 months trying to come up with a capabilities list, improving that out, because it's not only coming up with a safety management system that we already have, but you got to tailor that to the UAV market. And then you've got to train all your pilots. That took us about 9 months to come up with capabilities lists, and we just started off with bullets of what we wanted to do from our customers. And really didn't do our first job, really was 2016, 2015, we were just starting to do our first utility demonstrations as to what our capabilities were. They really liked it and came back to us with a few jobs to go out and do, small jobs, but came back to us with a lot more ideas of what they wanted to do for inspections, right down to actually, we pull in a lot of sock line for utilities. They have a lot of cases where they got to pull a line across a swamp that's 300 feet across. To cite one example, they went out and spent about $12,000 for a gun that would shoot a line, a P line, up over a swamp. And then they found out in the state of Massachusetts that you had to be licensed to have that gun, and they never used it. So we spent about 3 weeks developing a system, actually with 2 or 3 different vendors, and came up with basically, there's a cargo hook that you can put on them, and we actually pull this P line out across swamps or areas that they can't get to pull in conductor. And we were really skeptical as to how far we were going to have to go, how heavy the line was, how much the wind was going to carry it. So we spent quite a bit of time with that, and actually our first pull was a little over 500 feet. And we're convinced with people in line, down the line, and keep it in the line of sight, that we can probably do up to about 1,500 feet. I don't know that the U.A.S. market would do that, because typically you go much further than that. You're going to bring in a full-blown helicopter and do it that way. So that's just one of the additional things. One of the bigger jobs that we got this past year was working for one of the utilities where they had a line that was very difficult to get to walk. So they had contracted with us to do, it was about 33 miles of right-of-way. And what we could do with a helicopter, probably on an intensive inspection, take us, I don't know, half an hour to 45 minutes doing an intensive inspection. Took us 3 weeks to do with a UAV. Because what they wanted was, we have a big problem with woodpeckers in New Hampshire. I don't know what they like about telephone poles, but they do. And by the time we were done with the inspection and the deliverables, we were trying to figure out, we had demonstrated, told them what we could give them as to how they wanted it. So they thought the cloud was just the greatest idea. So we put it all on the cloud. And then they found that took them about 5 hours to download everything from the cloud. So they said, next time maybe we'll just do it on a memory stick. So a lot of these utilities or people that are out there that we're currently doing work for, they know all the buzzwords, they know everything that they want, but they really just don't know how they want to use it. So that's what we're trying to perfect right now with folks. Bridge inspections, we've done a couple of those. They found it on some of the major highways, to get somebody in there to do a bridge inspection from underneath, they had to close a highway down sometimes for 12 hours to go in, close down lanes. We went in on an early morning at daylight, all pre-planned with the state. They closed it down. We did a complete bridge inspection from underneath in about 32 minutes. So there are things out there that we haven't thought of, that you guys have thought of, that you could incorporate into your business. We can do on power lines typically about 35 structures per a 6-hour day. What we found was if you're doing with the video, you really have to keep the sunlight about the same for every picture that you're going along, because otherwise there's big issues with pixels and they can't see things. So we try to keep it the same. So you can't expect to go out and do a 12-hour day with them and have a really good deliverable when you're all done. Payloads, like I said, there's many different things you can do. Tower inspections, we've done some of that, where a lot of these towers that have been put up and they've done load analysis on them, a lot of them are maxed out, and they have to go in and do yearly inspections. The drones do a really good job of doing that. The hardest part is getting to them. We've actually done a couple where we flew in with the helicopter. This would be a great deal to deploy for doing something like that, because it can take you 6 hours just to hike in. So if there's a helipad that's close by or a place that we can land, we'll fly in with a helicopter and then deploy the drone. So that's worked out good for us too. Some of the other things that the USDA has contacted us. We're an ag operator also. We do a tremendous amount of work on the cranberry bogs in southeastern Mass. What they're looking for is more up-to-date, rather than satellite imagery, more up-to-date current flare-type infrared inspections. I mean, we've done stuff in the past with a helicopter. We go out and there's a chemical that goes out that's roughly $48 per pound. It's not something you want to waste. What they're trying to do is do variable rate applications of these, and this is where the drone's going to work, I think, really well. We're trying to develop all that right now. For the future, I said investing in payloads. It's rapidly evolving. I think the technology and the manufacturers have done an unbelievable job of changing with demands. It's really, the market is such that it's open to about anybody's idea that's out there. The big thing is most of us as operators already have a lot of the pieces of the puzzle. The manufacturers of the equipment have got it. It's a matter of putting that all together, developing the safety management systems, the risk analysis, and then integrating it. I think some of the bigger things in the future for things such as power lines is the software, machine learning, as it evolves, will require less human input. You think about it today, you walk out of your business, your cell phone goes off and it tells you how far you're going to drive to home, how long it's going to take you, the route, whether there's an accident or not. I think with the UAVs, and I'm not sure where they're at now, but as far as machine learning, I think in the future is going to be a huge asset for the industry. The beyond visual line of sight, I think, is going to be something that is going to take some time. How we do it now, we pass off as we go down the power line or right away or gas line. That's worked fairly well, but although not necessarily needed that much at this point because of the time frame that the UAV can stay in line. We found that out in the Northeast big time when it got cold. We totally expected it, but we were chewing through batteries a lot more than what we thought. I mean, we were basically, if you were to get full life out of the battery, we expected to get 40 minutes. We cut that down to 15, and we really ended up cutting it down to 12 when it got down to 20 degrees. Ended up getting 12 minutes out of them with a huge safety margin. So those are all things to consider when you're doing this. I personally think in the utilities that we work for, really appreciate the fact that we did get into it, because we have all the safety management systems, the risk analysis, and the contracts, whereas the other companies that are smaller haven't got the contracts. It takes time to get these contracts. Most of the utilities we work for now, everything has been vetted from all of our policies, procedures. Everything that we do is downloaded now. A lot of them are using the ISN network, you name it. So it's very difficult for somebody that just goes and buys the hobby UAV is not going to get that contract. So it's going to come through you people. That's how I viewed it. It's worked good for us. And if anybody's got any questions, we'll be glad to answer them.
Well, thank you, Ray. So with that, and I believe, and the lights are glaring up here, so I hope I don't miss you if you get up for a question, but we have mics, I believe, right here. And if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please acknowledge, yourself, and if you would, give us your name and who you're with. You have anyone? Here you go.
Yeah, I'll kick it off.
Go right ahead.
My name's Nicholas Henderson, and I started my own UAS consulting firm last year, Aerial Resources Group. And since then, I've been working mostly in the resource development industry, working with mines and energy producers on integrating drones into their existing operations. One of the questions I was writing as I was going through this is something I'm going to go back to Ray on, and I'd like to hear the panel discuss a little bit more, is for us as helicopter pilots, and I'm a commercial helicopter pilot, recently was flying EMS, how as entrepreneurs or as existing business owners do you see a reasonable way or an easy way to begin integrating UAS into pre-existing helicopter operations? For example, one of the things that we did with the EMS operator I worked with, we began using UAS to map and create a catalog of landing zones, identifying hazards such as wires and towers, and putting that into a searchable database for our pilots. So are there some reasonable ways that you can think of to incorporate UAS into pre-existing helicopter operations?
Yeah, I think that's, and that's what I did. We've been in business since 1983. I wholeheartedly agree with you. I mean, I sit on the board of directors for the National Aerial Applicators Association, and they're fighting this thing big time. At the last board meeting we just had a couple weeks ago, I'm trying to get them to embrace them and get them in like Matt has done. And I think can you educate, what everybody's worried about is not so much the professional, yourself and ourselves, more worried about the homeowner that can afford to go out and spend $500 to $1,000. And that's what they're really worried about is the aerial application business is running into these UAVs. For the most part, my personal belief is that the professionals are going to be out there. This thing will sort itself out. It's going to take some time. And I think with a lot of the technology that's coming about, that a lot of these folks aren't even going to be able to take off if they're in a bad area. But as far as integrating the UAV into a current business that you have, I think as operators, you've got every opportunity because you have all the foundation is there. That's what we did and integrate it. So I think it's a smart thing to do. We've embraced it. It's working for us. And like I said, vertically tiering the company so that anybody can call us. There are things that the UAVs can't do. There's things that the UAVs do better than what we do. A prime example is in our area, it's a lot of flat roofs. It's freezing, thawing conditions all the time in a lot of these big malls and stuff. And they get sold or whatever. We've been contacted many times and have done infrared inspections of these rooftops. And that's big money for somebody that's going to buy a building. That's a prime example where the UAV has worked very well and integrating into, they call it a one-stop shop. We can do it with a big helicopter, we can do it with a small UAS. Depends on what kind of money and what kind of deliverable they want in the end. But yes, I think as a helicopter operator or any of that, the key to it is, in my opinion, is having all that base foundation. And most people here have that.
Yeah, I would agree completely. I mean, it's if you're operating a helicopter, a good business protocol is to make yourself as multitask capabilities that you can offer the customer base, you're either going to approach this one way or the other. You're going to say, I'm not going to tell the customer that there's an alternative to my helicopter. That is really kind of naive. The customer is really looking for the vendor to be a partner and to basically develop technologies and capabilities that are going to make their operation and what you do for them more cost-effective, more efficient, and expand the capabilities that they have. It's kind of ironic because when the helicopter first was introduced and came into aviation, the fixed-wing community was terrified of us. These people don't need runways. They can land anywhere. And if you were really, in tune at that time, the fixed-wing thought we were the Antichrist, and going to put them out of business. We can go anywhere, we can land anywhere, we don't need runways and infrastructure, and we can do all the stuff they do, with obviously not within the limits of our range capability, but and now we flash forward all these many years and we have a technology that is, I hope we treat it, that's going to supplement us, just like we, the helicopter industry, supplement the fixed-wing community. But the smartest thing anybody can do is sit down, spend some time, develop capabilities that you think are going to enhance your customer's experience and offer them to them. And you're probably going to have a customer for life, quite frankly. If they feel that you're acting as our partner and you're looking out for our best interest, that's who I want to have my aviation activity with. Any other questions?
Well, we can piggyback on that one, and this goes to what Terry was talking about about the unmanned K-MAX.
Okay.
And in terms of future verticals for unmanned platforms, the K-MAX has proven itself in Afghanistan. It's proven itself on fires. You mentioned when you were talking earlier that your generation isn't going to be getting into a pilotless aircraft and going somewhere, but we're looking in Dubai. The EHang 184 unmanned taxi, they're trying to deploy that this summer. In terms of operations helicopter operations being supplanted by UAS, is that something that you see 10, 15, 20 years down the road? We're going to move from doing cargo hauls in Afghanistan and fighting fires unmanned to actually replacing the pilot altogether?
Well, like many of the big changes in aviation, they've been driven by the military. And I think once the military starts flying people without cockpit, with people in the cockpit, and they go through the risk analysis, they prove the concept, but more importantly, they have the reliability of that concept. That's what we're all concerned with, is reliability. I should say not all of us. I am concerned. I want somebody that has the same risk that I do. And I am a firm believer in unmanned vehicles because there's a great place for them, whether they're subsurface, they're ground vehicles, they're air vehicles. They're there to do a job. I'm not yet convinced that that job includes carrying people, but I think my children, and certainly my grandchildren, will be in those vehicles all the time. I can only imagine when our parents went to Disney World and didn't see a conductor on the monorail. They said, what is this? There's some doubt there. All it is about developing the technology, developing the reliability, and developing the confidence so we would get on those types of vehicles. And I think the military is going to lead the way on that.
Yeah, that's kind of an ironic reference to the Disneyland monorail. I remember when they started placing the monorails at the airports between the terminals, and people were horrified. People would literally not get on them. I'm not getting on something that nobody's driving it. Today, the younger generation, they don't think about it, and quite frankly, they don't even know nobody's driving it, and they could care less. It's just a whole philosophical point. I agree. I think it's generational. Everything that I've seen that's developed through the years, it's the next generation is the ones that embrace it and don't have a problem with it. The current generation, I mean, the average person today, well, your airline flight that's going to take you to California from New York doesn't have pilots. Well, I'm not getting on that aircraft. Are you crazy? I guarantee, and I agree 1,000%, the next generation is going to go, who needs pilots? They're going to get on the vehicle, and they're going to go. And that's something it's just who we are and where we're heading. But you have to understand there's just a transition, I like to call it, quite frankly, of being astute and moving forward and accepting the technology and embracing it and being flexible and develop your company and your business protocols to match it. I still say that the helicopter industry, I believe, will be the largest operator-owner of unmanned vehicles moving forward, because we're the ones that do that kind of stuff and would, be the best at it. And it's just going to be a different type of operation and vehicle, I mean, you think about this, I mean, and you look at the technology. When I first started, they were basic single-engine piston helicopters, and that was it. And I mean, the panel, it was embarrassing to call it a panel, it only had a few instruments on the thing. Today, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to bridge that whole span. I get into a helicopter, and it's completely digital. All I have to do is get the thing up to a hover and start it moving forward, and boom, I'm now managing systems. I don't touch the controls until I'm on approach, and the thing will shoot the approach better than I can, and in essence, either, come to a hover and give me the ability to do the visual land, or go around for me. In my wildest dreams back when, I never would have thought that was even remotely possible. And now it's completely accepted as the norm. So we have to grow with the technology as it's grown. To try to fight it, I think, it is naive and it's fruitless. So, anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Can you address the prospects, the opportunity, and the need for schools for, training the people to do this? Children up.
Yeah.
I could probably address that just a little bit, of course. So at the University of North Dakota, we have a baccalaureate program in unmanned aircraft systems. It's grown exponentially over the last 6 years. I think we're up to over 200 enrollees in that program now. And we all know that there's a pilot demand, but it's even more exacerbated with UAS personnel. So essentially every one of our UAS undergraduates are being hired before they ever get their diploma. They're being interviewed. So there is a demand for those folks out there. But when we put all the pieces together, there should be an emphasis on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I think it's really something that we need to reach out to, elementary school children and below, and work our way all the way up. And so I was really excited about the initiative that HAI has implemented, and was discussed at the open meeting the other day that Matt chaired, that talked about HAI's initiative to bring STEM and HAI helicopter education into the elementary schools, so that we create that interest in the young people, so that when they get into high school, they know that they need to take science and technology and math courses, and that they'll be more focused on technological majors in college, so that we don't have this slump and fall behind the world in a curve towards trying to have people that are educated and can bring us to the next level of technology. So I think that education is absolutely essential to our continued movement forward in this particular industry.
Yeah. I know we're aggressively have developed an educational outreach that runs from the elementary schools up into the collegiate level and technical schools. And it is focused right now today on helicopter careers and technology, but we actually have a supplement to that on UAS. And UAS is a natural for the younger generation. They're game players. They play video games all day. And if you offer them the ability to come off of the game platform on a computer at a house and say, how'd you like to go fly, with technology advancement, they love it. I mean, and I'm aware, it's kind of funny because I'm aware of it, because my IT advisors are my grandchildren. That's where I get my IT advice from. So, yes.
Can you give a range of how you monetize the services. For example, you know, if you're getting real estate pictures, oftentimes it's a photographer who has engaged himself in doing a UAV versus kind of a top line for what the oil and gas industry pays for deployment and or hourly cost and or power line work. What is the range for cost for these services from a contract basis? What kind of business model can you make? For example, if you're going to lease a helicopter, you know what your daily is or your hourly rates and the fees for that versus what you're able to get. There's probably a address for how much an oil and gas company is going to pay versus how much a power line operator is going to pay, all the way down to a real estate.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that it's any different than the helicopter industry and the pricing of the product and what the mission is and who the customer is. I agree. So it becomes a matter of what's the intensity or the depth of this mission. And as you pointed out, it doesn't take much to pull up to a house and launch a UAV and take a video, and you're probably out of there in 30 minutes. And that's a cost base that's going to have to be developed on what the person thinks it took them, you know, to go to the house, spend the 30 minutes, and then go home and edit, you know, the video. And my familiarity was that these vehicles are probably somewhere in the range of about $25 an hour. I mean, does that sound reasonable or too much? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not tracking.
But I mean, for a commercial operation.
Yeah, so I'm not tracking prices, but I do think for a simple job like pictures of a house for real estate, it's probably a few $100s for the job, but you can do 8 of them a day, and in one day you're already paying for the equipment when you think about it, because the equipment's only a few $1,000s. So I think the cost benefit is just very different from even just operating your helicopter for a couple hours is going to pay, wouldn't cover the cost of a real estate job. So I think that the economics are very different.
Yeah. But, you know, it's, put it this way, it obviously must be worth it because there's quite a few people that have entered into this endeavor and operate UAVs, and they seem to be commercially viable and successful.
Well, I'm looking for a little bit more specifics about, say, for example, that in the oil and gas that they're going to inspect an offshore rig.
Right.
What do they charge for that? Likewise, if you're going to inspect a tower in a power line, how do you price it? I understand there's a lot of variables, but getting some idea about what that range is.
Well, I think it's safe to say it's a multiple of much less than a helicopter for sure. I mean, that's just a general statement, but that's obvious. I don't know what the specific numbers are right now.
But we could have people who contract here and who do that. Maybe they could speak to that. I don't know.
I can give one example, Matt.
I can tell you that a little bit of the work that we did was a little bit more money than it would have been to do it with a conventional helicopter. But the deliverables of what they wanted in the end was a lot more than what we could deliver with the helicopter. We took pictures of these poles, very intensive inspection of each pole. So by the time it was done for the amount of mileage, and it's how you want to price it. If you looked at it on a mileage standpoint, we were about $1,400 a mile. Now, if you've been in New England, you'll find out that you just can't drive down the right of way. It's not like Texas. You might have access to here, and then there's a big swamp. You got to come all the way back out, go around, drive back in. So there was a lot of labor involved with it. So it's really about what do you want out of this? What kind of deliverable do you want? What's the terrain? That's what we look at. How much time am I going to have into it? You have a lot of time into it. So there's a lot of back office time, a lot of prep time that you've put in to get all to where you're at. And that's why I say, if you're a helicopter operator and you want to get into this, how do you price it? I can give you my business card and tell you how we did it. And we're still learning. We're still learning to figure this thing out ourselves. And I think there's a lot of promise, especially with the manufacturers of what they're putting into this is, I think, could help all of us. So from a business case,
Yeah.
As a helicopter operator, you've already got the safety management systems, the risk analysis tools, all that stuff, and now it's just incorporating and finding out. Our biggest problem is finding out what the customer wants, because they sometimes really don't know what they want. We're a vocational type operator, so there's many different things. We're an ag operator, external load operator, so we have all that stuff in place, and it's a matter of the end customer, and then you got to you got to get that out of them to determine how to price it.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I can, Mike Eastley, Precision UAVs here in Dallas, Texas. To answer some of his questions, which is not why I'm up here, but I'll do that in a minute. We do a lot of real estate, and we don't leave the house for less than 150 bucks. It's not about the drone so much. It's about getting there, getting set up, and you have an investment, and you might be able to do 8 of these a day, but you got to drive from one to the other, so how much you want to make a day? It comes right back to, we do $200-300 bucks for a house, depending on how big it is. That gets into how much are they selling a house for. If it's $1 million house, they can afford $500 bucks to put a nice bunch of pictures out and so forth. But if it's a $200,000 house, price break for that realtor's pretty low, so they're not going to want to pay even 150 bucks probably. So it gets to be, one of the things that I hate to see with some of this pricing stuff that I fight with every day is that some guy, just like in the helicopter business long ago, you're going to pay me to do this? This is great. Yeah. And they sell themselves cheap. But if you're going to try and do it right and do it the right way, it's about the time it's involved, your education, all the things, the cost of your drone. It gets to be if you want to do it for a business, it gets to be costly quite quick, and you can't sell yourself too cheap. So my other question is, one of my biggest problems is the battery life. Is there any technology coming down that's going to help me replace the so-called 20-minute battery in 12 minutes?
I think that question's for me.
Yeah, I think so.
We're trying. So everyone in the world wants better battery power, right? Your iPhone, and certainly the drones. So we've pushed the technology. So now, even in a battery this size, you're getting like almost half an hour. And then since we're operating mostly under visual line of sight rules, bringing it back, landing it, changing the battery, going back is not that big a deal. But in for that new M200 drone, we've got dual batteries, and I think that brings the flight time up to 40 minutes. So if you really have an application to be up there longer than 20-ish minutes, we are doing that with a dual battery configuration. I think until the lithium polymer, lithium ion technology improves for all consumer electronics, we're probably going to be looking at around the 30-minute point for these kinds of products for a while. We really need a breakthrough in the underlying battery technology.
Thank you. Couldn't come soon enough.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're out of time, which is a good thing. Means we used our allotted time frame for the event, and I appreciate the questions and your attention. And I think we had a great panel, wonderful presentations, and let's give them a round of applause. And again, thank you very much for joining us, and show's open. Enjoy the floor. Have a good time.